Hi VC, stay tuned for a quick addendum to this video. I have been waiting to upload this video for the past 3 weeks, pending the arrival of a certain item. That item has arrived today, so I will feature it at the end of the David Sylvian section, and this is the item in question. So I'll go through that with you later on, so please stay tuned for this breaking development. Hi VC, I hope you guys enjoyed this video and that you will have as much enjoyment from it as I got from making it. This video is an exploration of the group Japan and of the various tributary groups and the careers of the solo members that evolved from their demise.
Here's a brave new record. It's Japan. They're number 42 this week with Ghosts.
When the room is quiet, the daylight almost gone, it seems there's something I should know. Just when I think I'm winning, when I've broken every door, the ghosts of my life are wilder than before.
Hi VC, I reckon that when most people think of 1980s music, the group that comes foremost to most people's minds would be the Smiths, certainly in these islands. This is their debut from 1983 or 1984. This is the only work that I have by them, and it's the only one that I'm looking to get. I have kept this one. This is my original copy from 1983 or 1984 whenever it was released, purely for sentimental reasons. I don't listen to it anymore. When I do listen to it, I listen to maybe one or two tracks, principally Miserable Lie. My interest in them has thoroughly waned. I just don't find them interesting anymore. But I would have to say that, I acknowledge their greatness. I did for about 15 years, but I do not listen to them anymore. And frankly, I don't have the interest in them that I did back in the day. It has to be said that it was thoroughly unfashionable to be a fan of the Smiths in the early to mid 1980s. One was very much perceived as being weird or certainly a pariah for listening to their music. But in terms of other music from the 1980s, the group that I most listened to back then, and even now my interest in them has prevailed, is Japan. I remember that particular performance of that particular track that I've just played an excerpt from. It's one of my earliest, most abiding, most indelible childhood memories in musical terms, is that performance of that track. At the time, it was thoroughly at odds with everything else that was in the charts. Everything that was around it was a bright, sparkly track, full of optimism, Valkus, but this particular track was not optimistic. It didn't have a chorus. It didn't have a drum beat. It didn't have any percussive elements. It didn't have rhythm. It just had a bubbling synthesizer with eerie vocals and a spectral performance by the group on that particular day. That performance is culled from a weekly TV series called Top of the Pops, which aired until about maybe 10 years ago. But at the time, it was the only way for us teenagers at that time to get into music. MTV Europe hadn't arrived yet. I know that came in 1981 in America, but it took some years before it was shown in Ireland. Maybe it was shown earlier in the UK, but our only exposure to music at the time was through this particular program, Top of the Pops, and I remember just being gobsmacked by that song, by that performance, and by that group. It just completely came out of left field for me. And for me, it was very much progenitor for chasing up alternative music. I just thought it was a phenomenal track. To this day, my interest still prevails in the band Japan. They started out originally as in the late 1970s, just after the punk movement, as a post-punk band with glam rock leanings. They released 2 albums, neither of which I have any interest in now or even back then. And they were Adolescent Sex, which was their second one, and the first one was Obscure Alternatives. But I have no interest in either of those 2 albums. Their best moments are collected on this comp, which I do have, which is released on their original label, which is the Hansa label. And this collects the best moments from those 2 albums, plus some non-LP tracks such as I Second That Emotion and European Sun. So who were Japan? Well, they were a quintet of two brothers, David Sylvian, the vocalist.
All back on the ground against you, say the weather's dim, but relax my relax and swim.
And his brother Steve Jansen, that's their original surname was Jansen. Steve Jansen was a phenomenal drummer. He had a very, very busy style, a very polyrhythmic kind of a drummer. Sylvian had it wasn't a unique style, it was very much aped Brian Ferry's kind of crooning style, and maybe a bit towards Bowie as well, but certainly in the barometer it would have been a hell of a lot weight towards Brian Ferry's warble than it was towards Bowie, but certainly the Bowie influence is there too. But I will say that I find he does have, to my ears anyway, a relatively unique style. I think that style was developed, of course, not in the first two albums, but it was developed from this album, from the third album on. This is their third and final album for the Hansa label, and it's called Quiet Life. There was only one single released from this album, and that's the titular song, Quiet Life. The other member of the group, of course, was Mick Karn, who was originally, I think he was of Cypriot origin, and he had a very unique style. He played the fretless bass.
And swing. And swing. And swing.
And he would have been very rubbery, very angular style, totally at odds with everything else at the time. And he's gone on now to achieve considerable renown. He passed there, sadly, a couple of years ago, but an extremely innovative bassist for his time. The fourth member of the group was Richard Barbieri, who was a synthesizer keyboardist. He went on to become a member of Porcupine Tree. And the fifth and final member of the group was Rob Deans on guitar. So backtracking, their third album is this one, Quiet Life, which is an absolutely phenomenal album, one of their very best works. It features two great tracks that bookend both sides, that are very much proggy and an indicator of the change in style that they were about to develop. It's a friend, I'm going to have to ring him later on. Oh, now he's ringing me on the other phone. I'll ring you later, Des. Okay, so those particular tracks are The Other Side of Life and In Vogue, and they both feature relatively long instrumental codas at the end of the tracks. But there's two other fantastic tracks in this as well. Halloween and Alien I really like, and there's French vocals on the track Despair. So this is a phenomenal album. This comes with a strong recommendation, Quiet Life. For anyone that's interested in getting this, I will recommend them to go for the Music on Vinyl release, which came out maybe 2 years ago, which has got a third disc, a bonus disc of the non-LP singles that were released around this time, which includes I Second That Emotion and I think European Sun as well. So that's the third album, and this is the 12-inch for one of those tracks that I've just mentioned, I Second That Emotion, that I have as well. Their fourth album was Gentleman Takes Polaroids, which I don't have in any tangible form, but I do have all of the tracks bar one, which appear on this superlative posthumous compilation compiled by the band themselves called Exercising Ghosts, which I recommend anyone with a passing interest in Japan to get. This is a phenomenal comp, absolutely phenomenal comp, called Exercising Ghosts. Their fifth album was this particular one, which is Tin Drum, and this is perhaps the highlight of their career. They're very much in their groove at this time. Sadly, it was to be the last studio album that they released. This one they had found certainly their plane of existence. It was a very Eastern dominated sound, as this particular album cover may attest to. There's the chairman Mao Zedong, and there's Sylvian munching away on some chow. But a beautiful album. There's some extraordinary tracks in this. Canton is a gorgeous instrumental. Ghosts, the song that introduced me to the band, phenomenal, absolutely phenomenal track. Art Parties is one of the greatest of all of the singles that they released. I've got it in a few different formats. I've the Cruciform 7-inch, which I've shown a few times, and also I've got the 12-inch as well. But what a phenomenal track Art of Parties is. Absolutely phenomenal album, or phenomenal single. Visions of China was also a 12-inch released, and I think Cantonese Boy may have been as well. So this particular album, most of the tracks actually would have been released as singles, funnily enough. I think a total of 5. At this particular stage, the guitarist Robbie Dean had left them, and the group was augmented by an Eastern guitarist whose name I'm not familiar with, and I've forgotten, but that's in there. You guys can check it up at your leisure. He went on to augment the lineup for their Parting Shot, which is this fantastic double live album with studio overdubs and with some studio tracks as well, some studio instrumentals, and a reimagining. I think it was of the track Night Porter are on this as well. Night Porter was a single, phenomenal single, kind of a keyboard-led single that came from Gentlemen Take Polaroids. But this is a really, really excellent live album, and it was their Parting Shot, a posthumous album released after they had split up. It contains basically the entire 10-drum album and the best moments from Gentlemen Take Polaroids. There was a single released from that album, which is the Canton instrumental and also Visions of China. So this is the actual live tracks that were released as singles from that particular album, Oil on Canvas. So again, I'm recommending people to buy this particular one, certainly to check it out. And this one is certainly a must-have. Gentleman Takes Polaroids. I wouldn't go for an issue. You really see it at a bargain price. I would be recommending instead people who are curious in Japan to go for this one. This is certainly the best overview of their career. And the Japan story doesn't end there. For in 1991 they reformed without Robbie Deans. So 4 of the original 5, that Sylvian, Jansen, Karn and Barbieri reunited for one soft release called Rain Tree Crow. This I don't have in wax, I have on CD. It's a fantastic album as well. Rain Tree Crow. So that was released in 1991, also on Virgin Records. Now I would like to have a closer look at the solo career of David Sylvian. Later, David Sylvian did this collaboration with Ryuichi Sakamoto, the Japanese musician, and this one is called, it's a double-sided track called Bamboo Music, Bamboo Houses. This was released to great acclaim, and a year later they did this one, a reimagining of the track from the soundtrack from that Bowie movie Merry Christmas Mr. Lawrence, and this is that beautiful piano ballad, the do 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 and David Sylvian added his vocals to it. It's called Forbidden Colours, but a really nice 12-inch single there.
For the beat of my heart, I always forbidden.
2 years later, then from that, in 1984, Sylvian released his debut solo album, and boy was this worth the wait. One of the greatest solo albums of all time, featuring Holger Tsukai of Can, his brother Steve Jansen, the drummer formerly of Japan, Barbieri, formerly of Japan, Ryuichi Sakamoto again, Kenny Wheeler, and Mark Isham, both guys who were on the ECM canon at that time, and also Danny Thompson, formerly of Pentangle and of John Martin fame as well. An absolutely gorgeous album, features some lovely instrumental tracks as well. The Weathered Wall is on this, and there's some great singles in this one. Red Guitar and Ink in the Well, and I think Pulling Punches was a single as well. So 3 of the 4 tracks in side 1 were singles. Magnificent album, strongly recommended. I've shown this one before a few times. This Brilliant Trees by David Sylvian. His second album in 1985 was Alchemy, which I don't have. It's very difficult to get in wax. I've got it digitally, but I do have the EP that came from it, which is called Words with the Shaman. And I've got parts 1, 2 and 3, but that's a nice little one to get. This one came in 1985. And then in 1986 he released his masterpiece, which is Gone to Earth. This is just a phenomenal record, and this is on Virgin. It includes magnificent artwork, absolutely magnificent artwork. It features 2 singles. One was Taking the Veil, which is an astonishing track, and also I believe that was it Riverman or Silver Moon. I go for Silver Moon. I think was also released as a single, but this is equal parts instrumentals, equal part Sylvian's croon. What a beautiful kind of almost ambient in parts. Well, certainly very ambient in parts album. Phenomenal. There's no weak moments on this album. Just an absolutely astonishing piece of work. Absolutely beautiful. Gone to Earth. So that was his 3rd album in an extraordinary creative period. That was his 3rd album in 3 years. And he followed that in 1987 with his 4th album, which is Secrets of the Beehive, also released on Virgin, again with a huge cast, which included Danny Thompson was back on bass, his old cohort Ryuichi Sakamoto was back on piano. Who else was in this? David Thorne was on guitar, Mark Isham was back on trumpet, and was his brother on it? Steve Jansen was also on it. This featured 2 singles. The first one is Let the Happiness In, I think that's what it's called, which is a gorgeous track. Yeah, Let the Happiness In, and also Orpheus, 2 of his better tracks. But a phenomenal album. There's not one weak moment in this one. It's very difficult to separate Brilliant Trees, Gone to Earth, and this one. They will all vie for his greatest album. But this is just a phenomenal album. And the artwork in this one was very similar to ambient work, non-vocal work that followed in 1988 called Plight and Premonition, that was released in conjunction with Holger Tsukai as well, which I don't have on wax, I just have digitally. And then in 1989 he released, before that in 1988 his studio label Virgin were on to him, and they asked him to release something that was commercial, so he responded with a quasi-commercial non-LP track called Pop Song, but it skated the charts, the perimeter of the charts, but this is a very loose looking Sylvian there in the back, so that wasn't too much of a success for him, but he remains, of course, very much a critical darling. In 1989 then he followed that up with his 6th album, sixth album in 6 years. This is called Flux and Mutability, which is a magnificent album as well. This is an extremely strong album. It's thoroughly ambient again. There's no vocal aspects to it. There's no singing on it, but there are some vocals on it. And this one features, this is effectively Can plus David Sylvian. Holger Tsukai is on it, Michael Caroli, the guitarist, is on it, Jackie Liebzit is on it as well. So, beautiful album called Flux and Mutability. Then Sylvian took a hiatus from our producing music point of view. There were 10 years elapsed between Flux and Mutability in 1989 and his next release, which came out in 1990, which is again an ambient album. This never got a vinyl release. This is called Approaching Silence. This one features Robert Fripp, and it's a really, really beautiful album. Very, very, very beautiful. Very soothing. I listen to this one quite regularly, even now. For instance, last week I gave it a spin. Really decent. This one, I think, was culled from an art exhibition, an art installation that he had done in the early 1990s. So around this time, his personal life was in serious turmoil. He had depressive illnesses. He suffered a divorce, and things were going a bit awry for him. There was musings at the time that perhaps he had abandoned the musical industry at all. But he came back in 1999 with this particular ambient album, Approaching Silence. And then a couple of months later, he followed that one with a phenomenal piece of work called Dead Bees on a Cake. This is just a gorgeous album as well. Again, it features a cast of thousands. Really strong, phenomenal piece of work.
Mother cries beneath the open skies, and I surrender.
Dobro features, the second track features that guy that crops up absolutely everywhere from ECM. The Bill Frisell features on it. Just really, really wonderful album, this particular one. He's back singing again. He's back crooning, and this is just a highlight of his career. It's not as good as you know the three that I've mentioned at the outset, but it would certainly be perhaps his fourth best vocal album, and that was 1999. Dead Bees on a Cake. 2003 he released Blemish, which I only have got a digital copy of. Was never able to find a tangible version of it. It did get a vinyl release, but I've never been able to spot it or see it around the place. And here he is on the cover of that particular album, looking like David Beckham, the ex-England star, and wearing what appears to be quite similar to a Barcelona badge on his head cap. And in 2009, Sylvian followed Blemish with another vocal album. This one's called Manafon. It's not one of his strongest ones, and I'm not really going to endorse it, nor am I really going to endorse Blemish. You know, Blemish is okay, it has its moments, but frankly, it doesn't compare as a body of work. It doesn't stand up to the first incredible run of albums that he had between 1984 and 1989. Those first 7 albums are just brilliant. Brilliant Trees, Alchemy, Gone to Earth, Secrets of a Beehive, the 2 ambient albums, Plight and Premonition, Flux and Mutability, rather. They're all absolutely excellent. And then post-break, then the 2 albums, Approaching Silence and Dead Bees on a Cake, are all just a phenomenal run of albums, all of which, to my ears anyway, are certainly essential. So that takes us up to date with David Sylvian. Well, actually, that isn't it for Sylvian, because in 2013, via his website, he issued this exclusive, signed, 10-inch single, a 2-track single called Do You Know Me Now. As I said, this was released via his website, Samadhi Sound. I managed to pick this up from a reseller called Dylan. I'll leave his link below. He's quite a very decent guy to deal with. And Dylan kindly gave me 2 months to pay off this item. It's the most expensive item that I own. But I'm such a big fan of Sylvian, it was important for me to pick this up. And I'm actually going to sell another piece that I have to finance this particular item. It's a bit of an extravagant buy, but as you can tell, I'm a massive fan, so I'm relatively easy able to justify and to delude myself into thinking that it was value for money. But it is very exclusive, and all 1,000 copies are signed by Sylvian himself. This is the printed inner sheet on white and gold embossed paper. It comes also with a printed inner sleeve, basically giving details of the 2 tracks, and then it comes on beautiful white marbled vinyl. So that is the final piece in my Sylvian collection.
We left all the way down. I prized my daddy's ring from my hand, and I made a bride. We grew a flower in the desert.
And now let's look at some of the other members of the group, just to see how they got on post-Japan. First, I'd like to look at the solo works of Mick Karn. His works as a solo artist, his works as part of the group with Peter Murphy called Dali's Car. Peter Murphy was originally the lead singer in Bauhaus, but Mick Karn also worked with a trio, Terry Bozzio on drums and David Thorne on guitar. I think it was early 1983 when Sylvian wanted to bring it in one direction, Mick Karn wanted to bring it in a different direction. Mick Karn was first out of the blocks in terms of solo releases, and this is his debut album that I've shown before, called Titles. A phenomenal album. It's all instrumentals. Side 2 is all vocals. And Mick Karn was a multi-instrumentalist. Like, he played not just fretless bass, but he played was it flugelhorn and saxophone, keyboards, mellotron, everything, absolutely everything. But that's a brilliant album to get. That was his first album. But I do have this one, which is a group that he joined with a guy called Peter Murphy, I think, who was the lead singer for Bauhaus, which were kind of a gothic group, and they released one album in the early 1980s. I think they were about to release a second album just prior to Mick Karn's unfortunate premature death. When he died about 10 years ago. But they released this album, which is absolutely excellent album as well. I know some of you guys are into this one. Tim, this Gideon, I think you may have said that you were into this group. But Dali's Car, they got their name from a track from Captain Beefheart's Troutmask Replica album. Unfortunately, for some of the tracks on this album, the early 1980s drum beats have kind of marred the experience. Certainly the title track, Dali's Car, is showing its age quite badly. The second track, His Box, is a phenomenal track. Artemis, the 4th track on side 1, is a beautiful instrumental track. And I really like Create and Melt. I think really, really strong album, this one. Well worth checking out. Alternative music. If you're into alternative music, check that out. And how about that cover image? A phenomenal detail from a photo or a painting taken by Maxfield Parrish, the American artist.
You live in a dream, you only hurt yourself. The meat of your life create and melt in front of you.
Then he went on to form a group with Terry Bozzio. Terry Bozzio was formerly the drummer, with Frank Zappa, and another guy called David Thorne, who was a guitarist, an unconventional guitarist, formerly of the ECM staple. They produced an album together called Polytown that I have here. This is a promo copy of that particular album. It's an absolutely tremendous album. Alternative music, fusiony at times, but really, really good. It includes a whole clatter of oboe tricks in this one, including the Irish drum baron, which he plays, which is a hand drum that makes a welcome appearance on that particular album. And what of the other members? Well, Steve Jansen, Mick Karn, and Richard Barbieri went on to form a group together, a trio, but they also performed in a group called the Dolphin Brothers, I think it was called. And in the mid-90s, the Jansen brothers teamed up with Bernd Friedman and also Ryuichi Sakamoto to form Nine Horses. They released one album. However, just before that, David Sylvian teamed up with Robert Fripp to form a supergroup of sorts. And Sylvian went on to have another collaboration, this time with Robert Fripp. Robert Fripp approached Sylvian at a point in the early 1990s to ask him would he consider fronting a reformed version of King Crimson, to which Sylvian declined, but the boys kept in contact and they released two albums. This is the first one. The second one is a live album, but the first one is called The First Day. This is a really good album. It's got some very strong moments. I don't like the track Darshan that was released as a single, but other than that, it's got some really fine moments. There's a beautiful coda on the track Gene the Birdman, an absolutely beautiful coda on that one. And actually there's a B-side, the two B-sides that were released on CD single only for the track John the Birdman are some of Sylvian and Fripp's best work, but they never found their way onto any of the many Sylvian comps that exist, and on any comps of his work generally they don't appear on it. So this is the first day is what it's called. It's released on Virgin. And of course, Fripp and himself had played together earlier in Sylvian's career in 1999 for this one, Approaching Silence. Robert Fripp added his chops to this particular album.
I'll raise the curfew and sit by her door. She's been through this war. Just when I thought I could not be stopped, when my chance came to be king, the ghost of my life